Sagittarius, someone hurt you deeply, and karma is striking harder than ever. You were never meant to walk the easy road, but you were born to walk the truthful one. And that truth? Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it wounds you in places even you didn't know existed. If you've been feeling a quiet ache in your chest, a whisper from somewhere far beyond the surface, then this message found you on purpose. Not to frighten you, not to reopen the pain, but to show you that something sacred is unfolding, even if it came through heartbreak. What was done to you, the words they never said, the actions they never apologized for, they did not go unnoticed. The universe has been listening, and now something is shifting. Not because you asked for vengeance, but because your soul remained aligned with the light when it would have been easier to retaliate. In this video, we'll open the spiritual gates together. Not with noise, not with rage, but with truth. A truth that will meet you exactly where your soul is standing right now. If this speaks to your heart, gently like this video and subscribe to the channel. You are never alone on this path. And if this message reaches you in the quiet, please share it with someone who also needs a reminder that their pain is not invisible. Let us begin the healing journey. One that starts not with answers, but with recognition. Gate 1: the wound they never saw, and the fire you never let die. Sagittarius. There is a kind of pain Sagittarius carries that doesn't come with noise or blame. It is the pain of seeing too far, loving too deeply, and believing too hard in someone who never truly saw the vastness of your soul. You are often mistaken for the wanderer who cannot be hurt, the freedom seeker who needs no one, the laughter behind every scar. But beneath the boldness and adventure, there is a sacred truth few have the courage to uncover, that Sagittarius loves with a fire that could light the coldest of nights. And when that fire is rejected, mocked, or ignored, it doesn't rage. It becomes a quiet ember, burning beneath layers of silence. Someone hurt you, not with cruelty perhaps, but with indifference, with the kind of carelessness that made you question your worth. They may have smiled while you were unraveling inside. They may have taken from you the light you offered so freely, only to walk away as if it never meant anything. And you, with all your strength, didn't fight to keep them. Not because you didn't care, but because you knew that any love not given freely would only cage you. Sagittarius doesn't beg. Sagittarius burns. But not all fire is loud. Your hurt was invisible to most, because you kept traveling, kept smiling, kept showing up for the world even as your heart slowly unraveled in silence. You sat at the edge of your pain, looking at it like one gazes at a distant mountain, knowing it was there but refusing to let it block your sky. You held space for their healing while you bled quietly in the background. People often say you're too quick to leave, but they never saw how long you stayed beyond the moment you felt safe. They never saw how many nights you replayed conversations trying to find the moment it all changed. They never knew that your silence was not emptiness but mercy, choosing not to burn down what hurt you, even though you could have. Because Sagittarius, for all your fire, chooses not destruction but wisdom. There's something sacred in the way you hold pain. You don't carry it like a victim. You carry it like a lesson. You don't shout about betrayal. You write it into your philosophy. You don't plan revenge. You take your broken heart and you go somewhere no one can find. Into nature, into prayer, into movement, where your soul can remember who you were before they forgot how to hold you. And yet even there the wound pulses, because the betrayal wasn't just about a person. It was about a belief. You believed in something higher. You saw something in them they couldn't see in themselves. You gave them the gift of your faith, your vision, your loyalty. And when they failed to rise to meet it, it wasn't just your heart that cracked. It was your worldview. It was your belief in soul contracts. And yet, even in the ashes, you remain true. There is a story I once heard from a Sagittarius woman in her late 60s. She had loved one man for 20 years. He was never fully present, always half-hearted, unsure. Yet she stayed. Not because she lacked self-worth, but because she believed in redemption. She believed love could transform, could awaken. But one day he left. No warning. No real explanation. Just silence. Years later she said, "It wasn't that he left that hurt the most. It was that he never saw how much I stayed." That is the quiet ache Sagittarius carries. The ache of being loyal in ways the world never notices. Of being committed to someone's becoming, even when they didn't know they were worthy of it. You do not love to possess. You love to uplift. And that's what makes the fall so disorienting. Because when you crash, it's not from a small ledge. It's from the height of all your hope. But here is what many don't realize. When Sagittarius gets wounded, they don't turn bitter. They turn inward. They begin to wander not across maps, but within their own soul. And that journey, though lonely, is transformative. You question everything, not because you want revenge, but because you want truth. You revisit the moments of tenderness. You replay the betrayals. You read the signs you once ignored. You seek meaning in what broke you. And somewhere in that long pilgrimage of memory and silence, you begin to see what the pain came to teach you. Not that you were wrong to love, but that it's time to raise the vibration of your love. Time to be loyal to your soul above anyone else's potential. Because Sagittarius, you are not just a flame. You are the torchbearer. You are the fire that keeps guiding, even when you have no one to guide you. And when karma begins to act on your behalf, it doesn't come loudly. It comes quietly. A message, a dream, an intuitive knowing that they finally understand. Not your pain, but your light. You see, karma doesn't come to punish. It comes to restore balance. And when you chose not to react, when you chose not to fight back with the same energy that hurt you, you aligned yourself with that balance. You stopped the cycle of harm. You became the higher ground. A man once wrote, "I cheated on my Sagittarius wife years ago. She never said a word. She just left. I thought I won. But I've never been able to forget her gaze the day she walked away. It haunts me more than any argument would have." That is the power of your silence, Sagittarius. You don't need to slam doors. Your absence echoes longer than any scream. And the universe knows. It always knows who remain true. And you, my dear, were true not just to them but to yourself. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. Now the fire in you is changing form. It's no longer a wildfire consuming everything to feel alive. It's becoming a hearth, steady, sacred, self-sustaining. You are beginning to see that the wound they left wasn't a punishment. It was a portal. You were not cursed for loving too deeply. You were chosen to rise from the betrayal with even more clarity, more compassion, more power. And you are. Slowly, quietly, you are turning pain into insight, heartbreak into higher vision. You are not the same Sagittarius who first lit that flame for them. You are wiser now. You know who deserves your light and who only came to warm their hands. If you've ever been hurt so deeply that words felt useless, if you've ever chosen to walk away not because you were done loving but because you finally started loving yourself more, write it down now as a sacred offering. Not for them, for you. A way to acknowledge that what they didn't honor, the universe will. That what they dismissed, karma remembers. And if your heart still aches, know this. It's not because you're weak. It's because your love was real. And real love doesn't disappear overnight. But neither does it stay in places where it is not respected. You are allowed to outgrow the space where your soul was once dismissed. Sagittarius, you have come this far not to be consumed by the memory of pain, but to become a living example of how fire can be transformed. From destruction into direction. From heartbreak into healing. From silence into spiritual strength. You are not here to carry resentment. You are here to carry wisdom. Let the wound remind you of what not to settle for. Let the fire inside you remind you of what you still deserve. And when you finally meet the soul who sees you not as a wild blaze to be tamed, but as a sacred flame to be honored, you'll know. Because you will not have to burn out just to be seen. Gate 2. When the one you trusted the most becomes the one who hurts you deepest, there is a heartbreak Sagittarius endures that no one can see, because it doesn't come from strangers or enemies, but from the very people once welcomed into the sanctuary of your soul. You are known as the free spirit, the wanderer, the eternal optimist of the Zodiac, and many forget that behind your laughter is a heart that once trusted too deeply, too purely. When betrayal comes for you, it doesn't crash like thunder. It arrives like a shadow, quiet, cold, and uninvited, undoing all the warmth you once believed would last forever. You don't open your heart easily, but when you do, it is with your whole being. You let someone in, not just into your life, but into the sacred chambers of your belief system. You let them walk barefoot across the ground your soul had once traveled alone, and you trusted that they would honor the echoes of your past, the depth of your loyalty, the truth in your fire. But then they became careless, or silent, or distant, And that, dear Sagittarius, is the kind of loss that feels like losing a home you built with your own hands, brick by brick, dream by dream. It may have been a lover, a best friend, a family member, someone whose voice you once memorized, someone who knew how to calm your storms, someone whose absence now thunders louder than their presence ever did. You ask yourself, how could they hurt me like this after everything I gave? After I told them my stories, my fears, my truths? After I chose to stay even when I could have run? Sagittarius, you are a fire sign ruled by Jupiter, the planet of wisdom, expansion, and divine timing. You are meant to grow from everything, even from grief. But this pain, the one carved by betrayal, doesn't feel like growth. Feels like shrinking. Like a flame learning how to burn quietly without being seen. You might laugh in public, keep moving, keep learning, keep helping others, but in your private moments, when the world is quiet and the sky turns dark, there's a part of you that still aches for the version of them that once felt like home. You carry that pain silently, not because you're afraid to speak, but because the words can never fully capture what was broken. It's not just trust that shattered, it's the meaning. You wonder, was any of it real? Did they ever truly see me? Or was I just a warm place for them to rest until they found something easier, safer, more convenient? But here's the truth, beloved Sagittarius. You did not make a mistake by trusting. You did not fail because they left. You did not misread the stars. You simply loved with the kind of heart this world has forgotten how to receive. An open, honest, wild heart. The kind of love that does not calculate, that does not trade, that simply offers itself like a sacred flame. And when someone walks away from that kind of love, it is not your soul that loses, it is theirs. Because what they left behind was not weakness, but something so rare, so divine, that only those who've walked through lifetimes of loss can ever recognize it. Betrayal by someone you trusted doesn't just hurt, changes you. It makes you question your own light. But Sagittarius, your light is not broken. It is being refined. Your soul is being forged in the fire of awakening. Because now you are being called to a different kind of journey, not one of physical movement but of inner pilgrimage. A journey back to yourself, to the wild, wise, radiant version of you that existed long before you ever placed your trust in someone else's hands. There's a woman I once met, a Sagittarius healer who had raised 3 children alone after her husband walked out one winter evening and never returned. She told me, "I didn't cry the day he left. I cried the day I realized I had to become both mother and father, anchor and wind, fire and water for everyone around me." And she did. Not because she wasn't heartbroken, but because her soul remembered how to rebuild. And you, Sagittarius, carry that same resilience, that same ancient code that says, "I will rise, even if it takes me 1,000 nights beneath the stars." Maybe you haven't told anyone how deeply it hurt. Maybe you still smile when their name is mentioned. Maybe you've hidden the evidence of your disappointment beneath achievements and adventures. But I know somewhere inside there's still a small voice that asks, why me? Why did the one I loved most become the source of my greatest wound? And to that I say, because your soul needed to see what you were never meant to settle for. Because your light needed to be freed from the illusion that it had to dim to be loved. Because that ending, as painful as it was, became the initiation for a new chapter you couldn't have imagined while still clinging to what no longer served your spirit. When someone breaks your trust, they do not break your destiny. They simply show you who they were never able to become. And now you have a choice. You can close off. You can turn your fire into smoke and never trust again. Or, you can become the flame that guides your own way forward. You can choose to believe that love, true love, still exists not because of what they gave, but because of what you are still capable of giving. Not because of what they destroyed, but because of what they could never take, your courage to begin again. You are not here to become bitter. You are not here to shrink. You are here to rise, Sagittarius. To walk with open eyes and a scarred heart that still knows how to dream. To forgive not because they deserve it, but because your soul deserves peace. To stop asking for closure and instead offer yourself a beginning. Let this be your ritual of release. Write down what you wish you could have said. Speak to the memory, not to reopen the wound, but to honor the part of you that stayed too long. And then bless yourself for surviving it. For carrying all that disappointment without turning it into cruelty. For being the one who loved the deepest and still walks forward without needing to be seen as the victim. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are not behind. You are being aligned. And soon, very soon, the same heart that was once shattered will beat to a rhythm you've never known before. One that says, I am whole, I am healing, I am worthy, not because someone stayed but because I did. And when the day comes that someone sees you not just for what you offer, but for who you are, a soul forged in loyalty, in light, in truth, they will not let go. Because they will have done the work. Because they will have walked through their own fire. Because only those who have been purified can truly hold what is pure. So if you're standing in the ashes of a once sacred bond, remember this. Ashes are not the end. They are the soil of resurrection. And Sagittarius, you were always meant to rise. Gate 3: Spiritual love and soul connection. There is a love Sagittarius longs for. Not a love built only on shared hobbies, comfort, or fleeting attraction, but a soul-deep connection, a sacred recognition that whispers, I have known you before. It is the kind of love that doesn't just spark butterflies but ignites stars inside the chest, illuminating the deepest corners of your spirit with a warmth that feels both foreign and familiar. As a Sagittarius, you are not content with superficial intimacy. Your soul demands something more, something timeless. Because you don't just want to love, you want to understand the soul of another, as if reading scripture written across their energy. And when you feel that kind of love, everything else becomes background noise. But before that connection finds you, or before you're ready to fully receive it, you may wander. You may travel through lovers who didn't know how to hold your freedom without trying to cage it. You may fall for the ones who mistook your fire for arrogance or your independence for detachment. Some may try to shrink you into shapes that feel foreign, asking you to tone down your dreams, your visions, your thirst for meaning. And still, even as they left or as you walked away, a part of you never stopped believing in love. Not the ordinary kind, but the spiritual kind. The kind that reaches into your very cells and reawakens lifetimes of knowing. The kind of love that doesn't just meet you where you are, but sees where your soul is meant to go. You, Sagittarius, were born under the rulership of Jupiter, the planet of expansion, wisdom, and divine truth. That's why love for you is never just physical. It is philosophical. It is mystical. You search for someone who doesn't just love you, but contemplates the cosmos with you. Someone who doesn't just kiss your skin but reads the constellations in your laughter. You want to grow with them, travel with them, build not just a home but a vision. Because your heart belongs not to one place, but to the journey itself. And any soul you love must be brave enough to travel into the firelight of your becoming. That is why the soul connection you seek often arrives when you least expect it. Quietly, like an echo from a dream you forgot you had. It may not be perfect. In fact, it often begins in chaos, confusion, or even distance. But something inside you will know. A subtle recognition. A feeling of, I've met you before. Not necessarily in this life, but in some realm where time doesn't exist and hearts don't forget. And that knowing terrifies you just as much as it awakens you. Because it demands vulnerability. It demands stillness. And you, Sagittarius, have spent so much time outrunning the pain of being misunderstood that slowing down to be seen, truly seen, feels both sacred and terrifying. But when it happens, when that soul finally looks into you and does not flinch at your scars, when they admire your truth without needing to mold it, when they stand beside your fire without needing to tame it, then something within you begins to soften. Not because you have become less wild, but because you have been witnessed in your fullness. And when that happens, you begin to return to yourself. You begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, love doesn't have to be a battlefield. That maybe, there's a love that expands you rather than confines you. A love that adds to your spirit instead of draining it. There was once a Sagittarius man I met in a quiet village in the mountains of Peru. He had once been a traveler, a philosopher, a poet. In his youth, he'd left his country to follow the scent of sacred places and forgotten temples. For 20 years he wandered, always searching for something he couldn't name. Then one day, in a tiny cafe in Cusco, he met a woman who looked at him and said, "You remind me of a fire I saw in a dream I had as a child." That was all. No grand gestures. No vows. Just that one sentence. And he told me. In that moment, my soul recognized its mirror. And I knew I had finally been found. Sagittarius, that is what soul love feels like. Not fireworks, but ancient music returning to your ears after lifetimes of silence. Not perfection, but presence. Not possession, but permission to be exactly who you are, wildly and fully. And when you find it, or when it finds you, it will not demand that you shrink. It will invite you to rise. It will hold your hand not to control you, but to walk beside you as you both chase something greater than yourselves. But even if you haven't found that love yet, or if you've had it and lost it, please don't lose hope. Sometimes the most powerful connections are the ones that first appear in dreams, in sudden thoughts, in quiet longings that have no name. Your soul knows what it's preparing for. It knows the vibration it needs to hold to welcome the energy of the one who was made not to complete you, but to journey beside you. If it hasn't come yet, it doesn't mean you are broken or undeserving. It simply means the timing must align, not only for the meeting, but for the healing that must unfold before it. Because here's the sacred truth about soul connections. They are not always easy. In fact, they often awaken your deepest fears, insecurities, and unhealed wounds. Why? Because their purpose is not just to love you, but to reveal you to yourself. To break open the shell you created to survive the world and remind you that underneath it all, you are still light. You are still infinite. And Sagittarius, you are brave enough to face that mirror. So if you are loving someone right now and it feels like you've known them forever, even if your human minds can't make sense of it, trust that feeling. If you are grieving someone who touched you so deeply you felt like you lost a part of yourself when they left, trust that too. Soul connections are not measured by duration. They are measured by transformation. And sometimes the soul you meet isn't meant to stay, but to awaken something dormant within you. Something sacred. Something only that encounter could bring to life. I invite you now, Sagittarius, to pause, to place a hand on your chest, to feel your heartbeat and ask gently, is there a soul I still carry with me? Someone I can't explain, but who shifted the direction of my inner compass forever? If so, you don't need to reach out or reopen wounds. You simply need to honor the memory. Say thank you. Say I release you. Or say I still love you, but I love myself more. Because at the core of all spiritual love is not longing, it's liberation. And if you are waiting, hoping, believing in the kind of love that doesn't demand perfection but invites evolution, then write that vision down. Speak it into the stars. You who believe in magic even when the world calls it foolish. You who choose depth over convenience, fire over comfort, truth over illusion. You are being prepared for a love that mirrors everything you've ever dared to believe in. Don't give up. The soul you're looking for may be closer than you think. And when you meet them, not even the winds of destiny will be able to pull you apart. Because you will not meet on the surface. You will meet in the flame. Gate 4: Awakening and Inner Soul Comfort. There comes a moment in every Sagittarius's journey when the outer roads lose their meaning. The passport stamps fade. The noise of the world begins to blur. And the people who once filled the silence can no longer reach the core of your being. It is not loneliness but something deeper. A spiritual fatigue. A yearning for something that cannot be touched or named, only felt. It is in that quiet in-between that the awakening begins, not through fire or thunder, but through stillness. You stop searching for answers in places and people, and begin turning inward, where the true quest has always lived. Sagittarius, you were never meant to stay still in the way the world defines it. But there is another kind of movement, an inner migration, the journey back to yourself. For so long, your fire has burned for discovery. New experiences, new beliefs, new faces. You thought growth would always look like motion. But now, in this sacred pause, you are discovering that sometimes growth looks like rest. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop running and finally feel everything you've avoided on your way to becoming. Because beneath your laughter, your stories, and your bright gaze is a soul that has quietly carried a deep ache. The ache of being misunderstood, of outgrowing people before you even had the chance to explain, of always being the one who leaves first because your soul whispers there is more, even when your heart wishes to stay. This is the sacred paradox of Sagittarius. You are the wild one, yes, but also the philosopher, the priestess, the seeker of divine truth. And when your external roads begin to narrow, it is not the end of your freedom. It is the beginning of your inner temple, a space where you meet not just who you are, but who you've always been beneath the noise. And that meeting, that remembering, is the true awakening. You may find yourself waking in the middle of the night with tears in your eyes and no clear reason why. You may walk through a crowd and feel more invisible than ever before, even as people smile at you. You may reread old journal entries or return to songs that once gave you courage, and suddenly realize how far you've come. Not in distance but in depth. These are not random moments. They are signs that your soul is calling you back. Gently but firmly. It is saying, no more pretending, no more delaying. It is time to return to your light. And it's not about becoming someone new. It's about shedding the layers you put on to survive, layers of strength that weren't really strength, just shields. Layers of laughter that hid the grief you never named. Layers of wisdom that tried to outthink the ache of abandonment. You don't need to prove your resilience anymore. You've already made it through storms that others would not even recognize as storms. What you need now is not another journey into the world, but a soft journey inward, to sit with yourself, not as a critic or a fixer, but as a sacred witness. There's a woman I once met, a Sagittarius who had spent her 20s and 30s building a global brand, speaking on stages, writing books. Everyone knew her fire, but no one knew that every night she would sit on the floor beside her bed and weep in silence, whispering to the stars, "Why do I feel so alone?" She had all the answers the world wanted to hear. But what she needed was a safe space to ask the questions her own soul had buried. When she finally paused, when she canceled her next 3 trips and sat in one place for 3 months, she told me, "I thought I was stopping everything, but I was actually beginning everything I was truly meant for." That is what awakening looks like for Sagittarius. Not a sudden enlightenment, but a gradual return. A remembering. A slow peeling away of everything that isn't truly you. The fire remains, but now it burns cleaner. It no longer needs applause. It simply glows. And as you awaken, comfort begins to return. But not the kind you once sought from others. Not validation, not rescue, not even understanding. The comfort comes from within. A deep inner embrace that says, "I am here for you. I am not going anywhere." It's the comfort of your soul finally sitting beside your heart, holding its trembling hands, whispering, "We made it. And we are enough." You start to forgive yourself. Not just for the mistakes you made, but for the things you didn't know. You start to thank your younger self for being so brave with so little guidance. You stop punishing yourself for not being further ahead and begin to see that you were never behind, you were simply becoming. And now, in this sacred phase of your becoming, you realize that peace isn't the absence of struggle. It is the presence of gentleness. A daily choice to meet yourself with kindness, no matter what the world reflects back. You will begin to notice the small signs. A stranger's smile that lingers longer than necessary. A breeze that feels like someone you lost is walking beside you. A song that plays exactly when you need it most. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations. Echoes from the divine that say, yes, you are on the right path. Keep going. Even if it looks like nothing is changing, everything is changing. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this awakening is that you no longer need to force anything. You stop chasing what is not aligned. You stop explaining yourself to people who cannot meet you where you are. You stop trying to hold on to what no longer feeds your soul. Instead, you trust. You let go. You open your hands and say, whatever is meant for me will find me. I am ready, but I do not need to grasp. Sagittarius, this is your true power. Not just your fire, but your faith. Not just your freedom, but your ability to surrender. Not just your brilliance, but your softness. In a world that taught you to keep going, you are learning to pause. In a world that asked for performance, you are choosing presence. And in that presence, you are becoming the healer you once sought. So if you are feeling the stirrings of this awakening now, if your heart is heavier than usual, if your mind is quieter, if your body is asking you to rest more, listen. Do not rush through this part. This is where the deepest alignment happens. This is where the universe begins to rewire your story. Not through effort, but through energy. You are not falling behind. You are falling inward, into the arms of the divine, into the truth of your soul, into the life you came here to live, not to impress but to embody. Place your hand on your heart now. Breathe. Feel the rhythm of your own sacred pulse. And say softly, I am safe to come home to myself. I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to be whole, even before the world recognizes it. My awakening is not loud. It is real. And if you can write this down, I am not lost. I am returning. And the light I've been searching for outside has been living quietly within me all along. Conclusion: the return of the soul. Sagittarius, if you've walked with me through this journey, From the raw ache of betrayal to the sacred quiet of rebirth. Then I want you to pause now and simply breathe. Not to do, not to fix, not to run, just to exist as you are, right here. This isn't the end of your story. It's the return of your truth. You have traveled across emotional terrains most wouldn't dare to enter. You've burned through illusions, sat in the ashes of loss, and yet chose to rise. Not in rage, not in bitterness, but in something far more courageous, softness. And that softness is not weakness. It is the most sacred strength of all. The world taught you to be bold, to conquer, to lead with certainty. But the universe, in its mysterious grace, has been teaching you something else. The power of presence. The divinity of pause. The healing in simply being. You are no longer who you were before the pain. And that is not a tragedy. That is your miracle. You have become someone more refined, more radiant, more soul-rooted than ever before. You now know that karma is not just about balance, it's about reverence. That forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about remembering who you are without the wound. That light doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to be lived. So as you leave this sacred space, I want you to carry one truth. You were never broken, only shedding. And now that your soul has returned home to itself, you are ready, not to impress the world, but to walk through it in wholeness. Let your fire warm, not scorch. Let your wisdom guide, not preach. Let your presence remind others what it means to walk with truth, even when no one else is watching. If this journey touched your heart, if any part of your soul felt seen or soothed, I invite you, gently, naturally, to like, share, and subscribe to the Zodiac Wisdom channel. Not because you owe anything, but because healing grows when it is shared. And perhaps somewhere, someone like you is waiting to be reminded that they too are not alone. You are a light the world cannot extinguish. A soul the universe has trusted. A Sagittarius in full bloom.